Hello, college football fans. Welcome to episode 161 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Yes, and we're here today, a father-son duo, here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. We'll be focusing on our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, in their matchup against Purdue, as well as the big games from this past week of college football and what is coming up in the future. So, plenty to get excited about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We're tied for number one in the division, baby.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought of that because of some of the losses the other teams have taken.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that here momentarily. But we might as well celebrate that nice win by the Nebraska Cornhuskers with a cold beverage.
Yes.
I've got my Sapporo here, going through my selection.
Sapporo. That's a Japanese. Is it considered? Do they describe it like lager or Pilsner or whatever, or they don't really categorize things that way in Japanese beer?
I think they do, but I'm not seeing any label on the bottle, at least, of like what it is.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm drinking a fine Pilsner beer, Miller Lite. Cheers to you, son. Celebrating another victory.
All right. Cheers.
Oh, man, that tastes really good. For being a light beer from Miller, that's a pretty good beer. I must have really been thirsty.
You've been preparing yourself for this evening.
That's right.
Okay. So yes, the game we'll be talking about today is that Purdue game for Nebraska. And we gave a preview for that on our previous podcast. I predicted that Nebraska would win 21-17. And you predicted that we would win a little bit higher scoring, 24-14. And it being actually better than any of us thought in terms of the score, which was 31-14. Right. So our offense showed more prowess than it did against Northwestern in the previous game. On the other hand, it was a repeat of the Northwestern game in many ways in that the defense played exceptional and we had some great special teams as well. And then the offense kept making mistakes and would have one good drive and then turn the ball over the next, it felt like. So it was a very frustrating game that it, was as close as it was despite our general dominance.
Absolutely. And Coach Rule, I listened to his Monday press conference. We're doing this podcast on Monday evening. And so I had the benefit of being able to listen to Coach Rule's comments for his Monday press conference. And, he addressed that a little bit, that he's like, I know that you guys are kind of calling this ugly, but it's a win. Right. And it's not the way you'd like it to be. And yes, it's a little ugly, but there's an awful lot of good things we did, is kind of his thing. So he's like, don't get lost in the weeds of what we're trying to accomplish here. And, yes, there were some mistakes and et cetera, but let's focus on the positive as well.
Right. Well, I mean, very literally, the very first play of the game is we get a kickoff, from Purdue, and our guy bobbles it. And it seems at first like we recovered it on the pile, but then upon review, they turn it over to Purdue, and our defense is forced to come out immediately and try to make a heroic stop. And thankfully they do, and we get out of there with no points lost. But it was not a great foot to start the game out on.
No. Well, and, again, Alex, I'm here to tell you, I played football quite a bit. Your uncles played, et cetera, and I'm telling you what, having a scrum to secure the football after a fumble has been a part of the game since I can remember, and even obviously before me. And magically now, with the advent of this review process, apparently the people up in the with 3 or 4 angles of a camera can change their mind about this, and the fight and the scrum in the pile no longer matters, apparently. because our guy came out with that butt football after it was all said and done, and they gave the ball to us. And only upon review and reviewing film footage did they actually switch it and give it back to Purdue.
Right. And admittedly, it was clear that like a Purdue guy had his hand on the ball first,
Right.
but
Right.
and
Absolutely.
his knee was down. But my question
That's
was,
true.
did he get possession of the ball? That's what the video review didn't
Yeah.
show to me. So I would have called it as, the call as it was on the field stands, right? Not to say that
Stands.
it's
Right.
confirmed, but there's not enough to overturn it.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And frankly, when there is a scrum of that many bodies, there's no way that a couple of cameras from, 150 feet away can determine that.
Right.
I'm sorry. That was a piss poor use of the review process, in my opinion, when there's a scrum like that.
Now, to be fair to the refs, they were consistent in that there was a similar scrum later on in the game for on Purdue's side where they fumbled the ball, and it basically was overturned in our favor in that case. So, at least I can say, okay, they're using the video review clearly to try to determine these scrums, and whether we would agree with that or not, they gave it to us one way and they gave it to them the other way, right? So,
Right. But the thing is that one wasn't nearly as much of a scrum, right? And it was much, much more obvious that a ball was secured in a separate location. The ball literally spun around, popped out, bounced around, and then got secured by a Nebraska player who then curled up in a ball and then came out with the ball. That was a much more obvious situation. It was easy for both the refs and the video to determine that, right?
right.
So that's where I'm saying this use of video review in that situation, I think needs some definition so that those guys don't feel like they have to make that call. Like you said, the use of the play stands as called needs to become more common. Period.
Right.
That's what I think. But anyway, and so that leads to that. Let's just go ahead and fast forward a little bit because so our defense does a great job, stops them, actually pushes them backwards a little bit, and their kicking game is so shaky, which comes into play obviously throughout the game. They decide not to kick a field goal, and they just decide to go ahead and go for it on fourth down, not punt it, but go for it on fourth down because why not, right? And they don't get it. And so we end up with the ball basically where we had it on the kickoff.
Right.
Right. I mean, it's almost like a push button reset thanks to our great defensive stand.
Yeah. Yeah. And this game echoed a lot of the other games we've had in the Big Ten West this year, in that it was kind of ugly on both sides. We ended up having 4 fumbles in the game. And then Purdue had 3 turnovers of their own. Purdue had 9 penalties for 99 yards. We had 6 for 49, so not a very pretty game on either side. It was a cold, kind of windy day in Nebraska, right? And the wind definitely played a factor on both sides of the ball. So, not the prettiest game, like you say, but at the end of the day, we got the job done. Our defense put on a stellar effort and only gave up points when the offense put them in terrible positions. And even special teams, right? We had a blocked field goal return for a touchdown and a 55-yard field goal with the wind at his back by our kicker. So, obviously the muffed kickoff, catch, right? The fact that he fumbled it on the kickoff catch, that's a knock against the special teams. But otherwise, we were solid on that side of the field.
Right. Absolutely. So anyway, to kind of get back to the sequence of the game, so we kind of go back and forth here a little bit early in that ball game, without either team being able to establish much. I mean, we had just errors, right? Penalties, multiple fumbles, just not a good start for either team during most of the first quarter. Only late in the first quarter do we finally sustain our first drive.
Right. Well, in reality, right, I mean, we had I think there were like two two actual solid drives that we had the whole game, which was the one where we led to the first touchdown, which was real nice. A lot of third down plays where we managed to convert the third down and just move the ball down and scored. And then the drive at the end of the game, which was, off of an onside kick, right? So it was less field to cover. And then our, other touchdowns were one, a huge pass play, and the other, the blocked field goal for a touchdown, right? So we scored some points on other sides of the ball, which was very critical for us.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But that drive, which I believe was 16 plays long, probably there was one other drive this season that I would put in that category that I thought, wow, that was a very impressive drive. I loved the play call combinations, et cetera, et cetera. And I can't put my finger on exactly what game that was in, but there was only one of them up until this game. And then that 16 play drive was really impressive for a variety of reasons. Just all the things we overcame. We threw the ball, we ran the ball with some effectiveness. I mean, it was really a nice. And then the touchdown play where we had a great job by our wide receiver to do an inside curl route that basically got himself in the way of two defenders. Without any contact that would have led you to believe that it was a pick. And yet he absolutely did a great job of shielding so that our tight end could sneak out there and catch an easy touchdown pass.
Right. And I believe that drive also killed like 8 minutes off the clock or something like that. So I think it was our longest drive in terms of play clock time of the season.
Yes, that is correct. It was exactly what Coach Rule would like to be able to do, right? He would love to be able to do that with impunity against other teams and then take your shots, which actually, so the next series, Purdue isn't able to get much done. Again, our defense didn't give up much all day, but they may have gotten one first down or something, but we get the ball back and rather quickly on the first play. In fact, if I remember correctly, oh no, I'm wrong about that. We intercept the pass. That's what it was. Our first interception happened on that next drive. After they'd gotten a couple of first downs, we end up getting an interception and are able to return it to about the, I guess 35 or so yard line. And I guess it was a 73-yard pass. So that would make it the 27-yard line, right? And then on the very first play, we run an option pass, and our young freshman gets behind the defense, and Harburg throws another beautiful long ball. And this was early in the second quarter, so we had switched and had the wind behind us, so Harburg could throw it that far. And he threw that ball a good 55 yards in the air, and it was a pretty good throw too. I mean, maybe he could have flattened it out a little bit, but our guy was so behind. He was so wide open that it didn't matter. He just had to get under it and then take it on in for a score.
Marcus Satterfield there called something I usually hate, right? Which is going for a deep pass on 1st and 10, right? When typically you just want to start, progressing your momentum, getting things rolling. But to his credit, we had a lot of just momentum in the stadium already because we had scored our first touchdown and then we just got this interception. And so he goes for it and it happens to be, wide open. So credit to him. That time it worked.
I would argue that part of what allowed that is because in that particular case, we had a 16-play drive in which we had ran probably 3 or 4 options, right? Option runs. So we had established ourselves with that motion, with that movement, right? And so those defensive players now, having seen that action 3 or 4 times in just the previous series, are far more likely to bite and take a first step forward when they see that same action, right? That's the key. Okay, so in this case, I can understand why he did it, and I think he had established the option game enough prior to that he could do that. But you're right. I hope, I know that they self-scout, and I hope that the coaches are recognizing that they've now set themselves up with a pattern. They have tried the first play deep pass about 5 times this season, 5 or 6 times this season, and they've hit on it twice, right? And maybe 7 times this season. So quite regularly on first plays after a change of possession, or particularly after a quick change, right, like an interception, they go for the throat. Again, my opinion, that does not show the kind of patience I would like them to show. And I think it sets up a precedence where they have now built in a tendency. And if I'm a defensive coach preparing for them now, I'm reminding my team before they go out for the first snap of a series to say, hey, guys, remember, these guys like to go deep on the first play. And we're going to end up getting some interceptions where people anticipate it and are able to jump it, right?
Right.
So I think I hope what that means is he's going to have more confidence and patience in future games where instead of doing that, he chooses to run the football a few times, and maybe we pop a couple of good running plays that get us a first down or two. Then we run the play, right? Then we run the option pass, and magically it's still open.
Right. Well,
right.
And to your point, it was it's kind of in a macro sense building off of what we did on the previous drive, because in total we ran it 48 times in this game for 155 yards and threw it 11 times for 122 yards. So compared to the Northwestern game, right, which was much more, well, not much more, but we definitely passed it more in that game. This game, I think Marcus Satterfield, both because of the strengths of our players and the weather, knowing that it was going to be a cold, windy day, we were more attached to that ground game, running the ball. And so we were, like you say, we were kind of able to surprise them with a deep pass like that, because that was the first one I think Harburg had gone for in the whole game.
Well, it was the first or the second. I think there might have been one earlier than that. But yes, the bottom line is I get why he did it. And because we had established ourselves in our running game a little bit more, I'm a little more comfortable with that. But I would still argue that it still demonstrates his lack of patience. And I'm looking forward to the day when maybe he doesn't do that anymore, right? Or not anymore, but I mean, way less frequency.
Yeah. And this is an interesting stat I'm seeing here. So we had 14 first downs in the game. And in terms of third down conversions, we were 7 of 14. So still not exactly where you want to be, but much better than the 4 of 12, I think, that we were last week. And it also shows that basically on half of the first downs we got in the game, half of them were off of third down conversions, right? So that goes to show you how often we were, just getting into third and medium, third and makeable type scenarios and actually being able to convert off of them.
Exactly right. You are correct. And that is actually something that Coach Rule did address in his press conference today. He actually said that their goal was to be at 40%, meaning that they wanted to be able to convert on third down at least 40% of the time or more. And of course they did. They converted at 50%. Now, he also pointed out that defensively they failed a little bit because at halftime, Purdue was 4 of 8 on third down, but then they ended up 5 of 13.
5 of 16.
5 of 16, rather, excuse me. So they ended up being 1 for 8 in the second half.
And not to mention, they were 0 of 3 on fourth downs.
Right, exactly. So, which was just incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, our defense rose to the occasion. Now, again, we were helped by the opponent in this week,
yeah.
which we were not helped. When you play a Michigan, right? They make those catches, right?
I recall you saying on the previous podcast that this Purdue quarterback is good, very good, but he doesn't have the same receivers that Michigan does, and I think that definitely showed in the game.
Absolutely. And so we can't get overconfident in our defensive performance, although the stats and the numbers look impressive. And I'm the first one to say I enjoy the aggressiveness, but I'm here to tell you that Purdue's offensive line did a pretty darn good job of picking up our blitzes. We didn't have that many sacks.
Yep. Only one.
Only one. And I mean, they just picked up an awful lot of them, right? And if that quarterback had some of his receivers catch a few of those passes, or he maybe make a slightly better throw, some of those drop passes would have been great catches, right? They weren't perfect throws, but certainly catchable. And so when you play against a better team that has a slightly better, more accurate quarterback or better receivers, we might have been in trouble, right?
Yes. Well, and speaking of that, of course, one thing we were looking at in this game was the performance of our offensive line, because we had more injuries to that position in the previous game with Northwestern, and it was an area of concern for us. And that concern definitely bore out. Number 4 and number 5 on their defense felt like they were getting into the backfield an awful lot and disturbing plays. They got 3 sacks on us as a result. Got some big hits on Harburg on a few occasions. So the offensive line is definitely an area of concern moving forward for the rest of the season, I think.
Absolutely. Although, I saw some glimmers of optimism in that, we were able to run the football with some reasonable effectiveness with this new group of offensive linemen. And, our the 2 outside linebacker / defensive ends for Purdue probably are both going to play on Sunday. Those were really talented players.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how many. I mean, I haven't researched Michigan State and our other future opponents, but I don't know how many of them are going to have defensive ends that as a pair are better than those 2 guys were. So the good news is that I don't think either one of our offensive tackles were turnstiles in this game. They might not have done great, but they weren't awful. Okay, and so I'm actually encouraged by what I've seen from the offensive line. And then, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, at the end of the game, when it was obvious that we needed to run the football to basically run out the clock and secure the victory, we were able to do that, even though clearly Purdue knew we were going to run it.
Right.
And that speaks to the offensive line's ability to get around this thing and get control.
Yep. And speaking of that, Johnson had a good game, 13 carries for 76 yards, including the final touchdown run of the game, which got us up to 31 points.
Right.
And then as for Harburg, he wasn't as good as usual running it. He ran it 19 times for 22 yards. I think some of that is affected by the sacks or tackles for loss that he took.
Correct.
And then he was 6 of 11 throwing it. But the bigger thing, of course, was the fumbles, right? He coughed up the ball twice in the game, and it was to the point that they replaced him with Jeff Sims for a series, which, of course, led to Jeff Sims also fumbling it and it being picked up and scored by Purdue.
Well, and he actually didn't replace him for a series. He replaced him for basically one play, and it was in part because Harburg got rocked, okay, on the previous play, and then got hammered because they ran an option on the very next play,
right?
Okay, which then put them into a fourth down situation. And I guess he was in for 2 plays because I think in the first play Jeff handed the ball off, and our guy ran it, but we didn't get the first down. So then it ended up being 4th down and whatever, 1, and we went up and tried to get them to jump off sides, which they didn't. So then we called the time. We took the 5-yard penalty because we were at midfield, and that was just going to give our punter a little more room to punt, because we had the wind at our back, and so we were just going to punt it. But then they jumped off sides, which then prompted Rule to reconsider. Okay, now I'm back to 4th and 1 again. Maybe I just go ahead and go for it. So he had a play that he thought would work, and they decided to go ahead and go with it. So even though his gut was to just punt the ball, try to get them inside maybe the 10-yard line even, and put your defense out there, which has been playing great, Instead, he thinks, you know what? No, this is a chance for us to potentially seal the deal and finish this game right now, right? Because we were already up at that point. We might have been up 24-0 at that point. That might have been, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was before the field goal.
Well, it was 24-7, I think, at that point, because Harburg's fumble had happened earlier, right, which led to their first touchdown.
Okay, gotcha. So anyway, yeah, that was the deal. And Coach Rule really kind of stiff-armed the questioning of his decision to keep Harburg in. I don't think Coach Rule realized how severe the collision was that Harburg was involved in. All he knew was that Harburg was a little bit bloody, and he's like, well, that's just, suck it up. You got to be tough. I think probably in his own review of the film now, after watching that play, he probably realizes Harburg really, really got hammered on that play. I mean, geez.
Right.
And so if he had known that, he might not have, he might have either encouraged them to go in a different direction or maybe even called a timeout or something to give him a chance to gather himself, because that was just a bad sequence, I think. And again, we got all kinds of people on that sideline, all kinds of people that work for the football program. Somebody should be paying attention to who's hurt. Remember, I've talked about this before, both in terms of I would have personnel whose job it was to watch our players, especially our skill players, and to watch the opponent's players as well. And if you see somebody who's hurt or who's clearly limping or whatever, or if you see your own players that get rocked, you either sub them out or you make sure that the coordinators know, hey, this guy's bell's rung right now. Give him a play off, so to speak, if you can. Right?
Yes. So it should be stated, I missed like the very end of the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter, I shouldn't say missed, but I was listening to it. I was driving somewhere and I missed certain sections. So I may have been a bit confused about the exact reasons.
You clearly have a life priority problem.
I'm actually doing things. I'm having fun out here in LA.
I know.
But
just giving you crap.
But I watched the highlights of the game afterwards, so I saw that big hit on Harburg that you're talking about, and then the Jeff Sims thing that came in afterwards. So I get that that's not necessarily fair to Jeff Sims, right? That he was brought in for 2 plays, in this weird situation, but still. It cements to me, based on, once again, our discussion that we had last week about, you asked me, how long do you think Harburg stays in, right, if he's having a rough day? And I was still pretty pro Harburg in terms of how long coach would stick with him. And I think this cemented the fact that, Harburg's the guy, unless he's, seriously injured. He's our quarterback going forward. Jeff Sims is not the answer.
Well, yes, but like you say, on the other side of that is, I want us to be clean enough offensively and defensively in a game at some point this season where we have a comfortable lead in the fourth quarter, say 28 points, where we can put Harburg on the sidelines and let Jeff come in with the second team or some maybe of the second team offense and execute, right? Run the damn offense and be in a situation where it's not under duress because the game is already decided, we're far enough into the fourth quarter, blah, blah, blah. But yet there's enough time for him to have more than 1 or 2 snaps and then see how he does in that situation. Because at this point, I think his confidence is just shot, and he needs to be able to prove with people in the stands that he can play this game at a high level. And I know he's got the physical skills.
You've overcome your Scott Frost PTSD more than I thought. You're already talking about luxuries like being up 28 points and letting our second team quarterback come in. When did this happen?
Well, I got yelled at by your mom for being too negative during the game. And then, of course, right after she yelled at me, we had that sequence we're just discussing, and magically gave up basically 2 touchdowns in a matter of 2 minutes. And we were now in a dogfight again, right? Where
Right.
we no longer had a comfortable lead. And thank God we had good coverage on 2 onside kicks, although the second one, uh, I really didn't like our coverage on it at all. It worked out for us, but it still scared the heck out of me. So here's some bottom lines about this, and maybe I'll summarize my comments about this particular game. Obviously, thrilled with the victory. Love the toughness that this team is showing. I love the depth, also, especially on defense that this is showing. So it's good stuff, but I'm concerned that we can't seem to find a way to play a clean football game. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to that next step that we need to take so that we can have a good, clean football game.
Right. I mean, yes, the bottom line is that we're at 5-3 now. This continues our win streak that we're currently on. So it's all good news there. In terms of injuries, the most major one was that Omar Brown is currently going through concussion protocol because he got rocked in the game. But I think we made it out of the game without any other major injuries, which is good because we can't afford any more.
Right.
And of course, we have the game against Michigan State coming up next. That is a away game. Whereas, a lot of these games we've been playing more recently have been home games. Actually, the only away game we've won this season was the game against Illinois. And apparently Vegas thinks we're 2-point favorites against Michigan State because they've also had a tough season. They just came off a game against Minnesota where they were playing Minnesota at home for Minnesota, and they lost 27-12. My observations from watching the highlights of that game were that MSU's defense actually played quite well. They got 3 turnovers on Minnesota, and they blocked a field goal. But Michigan State's offense just couldn't get anything done. And they had they gave up 2 interceptions, which led to some of Minnesota's points, and also only had 1 touchdown. The other points were scored via 2 field goals, I believe. So it's kind of interesting, right? Both teams, I think, lean more on their defense than their offense. Their offenses have struggled. It's going to be a home game for Michigan State, so that should give them something of an advantage, but also the morale of the team and the Michigan State program as a whole is obviously low because of the Mel Tucker situation and everything going on there. So I think we should be able to take this momentum that we've been carrying and win. I don't think you'll get your wish of it being a clean game where we're able to build a big lead. I think it will be ugly once again because that just seems to be the trend for us. But I think we can win.
Well, it is an away game, which we're 5-1 in the last 6 games, but we've had quite a few at home during that sequence, and so that home cooking has really been helpful for us. But during this process, it has allowed us to kind of learn how to win, even though it's ugly. And so you're right. I'm optimistic, but I think it's going to be a slugfest. Also, I agree with you. I think Michigan State's defense is playing surprisingly well and hard, given all the dysfunction that exists right now at that program. They're really doing a pretty darn good job. So we better get there focused and ready to play some football and not get all cocky and stuff. So, and I think we will do that. So I'm hopeful that we can put it together enough that we can come out of there with a victory. Our defense should be able to keep their offense at bay. I think the real key is their defense against our offense.
Yes, I agree. And I hope that this week in practice, we are drilling ball handling drills and, preventing fumbles, right? Because that, 4 fumbles in this, 4 fumbles given away in this Purdue game was obviously a problem. And now, that we saw that in the Northwestern game, we saw in the Purdue game, every opponent we play from here on out is going to be targeting us for that. We know that, like I said, Michigan State forced some fumbles on Minnesota just this past week. So I hope that we're ready for that and we only, maybe turn it over 1 time. That I could accept. But I hope to see some improvements in our offensive line. This was, like we said, this is their first time really playing together as a new unit in this Purdue game. So maybe they'll be a little bit more coordinated for this upcoming game against Michigan State. So I'm going to say that we managed to win in another low scoring game. I will say it'll be 17 Nebraska to 10 Michigan State.
Wow. Okay. That's really low scoring. I am going to also predict a Husker victory. I think it's going to be higher scoring than that, though, because I think the defenses are going to score some points, and there's going to be some special teams snafus. Hopefully, only on the Michigan State side, but likely there'll be something that we'll do as well. And I'm going to go with a 34 Nebraska to 21 Michigan State. 34 to 21.
Okay, I like it.
I just happened to be pulling up. I'm just reading the depth chart that was released for this week for the Michigan State game. And I'm without naming names. I'm just going to tell you what our offensive line and tight ends are. Okay. And this is going to be starter, backup, starter, backup, starter, backup. Their year of eligibility: sophomore, freshman, redshirt, freshman, freshman, junior, redshirt, freshman, sophomore, redshirt, freshman, junior, redshirt, freshman, sophomore, redshirt, freshman.
Yeah, we're burning a lot of red shirts.
We are very young. Well, no. But here's the other thing. So now with the Michigan State game, some of these guys actually had not played yet, right? They are true freshmen. And now they can play 4 games in a season, right? Without losing eligibility. So we now can use these guys for the remainder of this year. And they are still going to be considered redshirts, and they can play in the bowl game. So they can play effectively 5 games and still protect their redshirt. So if any of these guys are true freshmen or redshirt freshmen, or true freshmen who have not yet played, and I think there's a couple of them on this offensive line, they now can play the remainder of the season. And so all of a sudden we just got a little added chunk of depth, if you will, because of that circumstance, right? So this is an example in this particular year where that's going to help us. And I don't know if there's any wide receivers that fall into that category, but again, the entire offense, even if I looked at our our running backs and that sort of stuff, all of our skill position people, all freshmen and sophomores, very few seniors. I mean, we got a couple of running backs who are seniors, and that's it on the entire offense. And so our team is incredibly young and youthful, and we're getting better. And it's kind of exciting to think about what the implication of that is for next season.
Yeah, I would agree. And one final thing I'll say, because obviously that Purdue game was a very critical one. We're now at 5 wins. We need one more in these last 4 games to get to 6 wins, right, which is your minimum for guaranteed bowl eligibility. And I think I even saw a comment from Matt Rule talking to the players in the locker room about how I'm not thinking about one more game. I want to go out there and win every game we play, right? And I think that's the right attitude for the coach to have, for the players to have. But as a fan, I would say, if we need to win one more out of this next 4-game stretch at a minimum, right, to get us to bowl eligibility. That is my benchmark for the season. If we don't achieve that, I will definitely be disappointed. If we do, I think it's a great sign for Matt Rule in terms of a progression from the Scott Frost era into this new era. So I think that's really where we need to be. And if we can make it 7 or 8, all the better.
Well, now there's 2 things about what you said that I need to respond to. One is Coach Rule definitely is all about 1-0. That's his moniker. He beats that like a drum. Okay. So when you say just one more game, we as fans are looking at it based on the fact that we have 5 wins and we want one more game to get us to 6 to make it bowl eligible. His point is, I'm only looking one game. I want to be 1-0 this week, and I'll worry about 1-0 next week. Right. So he's all about 1-0. His whole point is, I just want to win football games, and I want to win them one at a time, because that's the way you win football games. And he's really believing it. In fact, I've seen a couple of people who've made homemade 1-0 T-shirts. I think I'm going to have to get one. I'm sure one's going to come out, and I want one of those T-shirts because I'm all in on that philosophy, and I want that to become a trademark thing about Nebraska football is 1-0. Just stay focused. Don't worry about anything else. Just worry about this week and winning this game, being 1-0. Don't worry about any of the other speculation and all that. That'll all come. It'll all play out by itself. Tom Osborne he didn't use the 1-0 concept, but his whole point was all about that. And he broke it down even further than that. He broke it down into getting first downs, get first downs and first downs and first downs, and they become touchdowns. And then touchdowns become, victories, and victories take care of themselves. And the next thing you know, we're in a bowl game, and then we're, ranked, and all the other stuff just happens automatically. But as long as you stay focused in on what you are doing. So I love the 1-0 thing. Love it. Second thing, our field goal kicker kicked a 55-yard field goal, and it easily could have been 60.
Right. With the win at his
Incredible.
back.
Yes, but still, he popped the heck out of that baby, and it was right through.
Yep.
It was awesome.
Yep.
So that's a great confidence booster for our kicking game, which has been a little shaky, frankly.
Right. But like you say, it's been improving.
Yeah, it's been improving.
Yes.
Yep.
Which is the
anyway.
Which
Okay.
is the theme.
There you go. Yes.
All right. So yeah, quick segment on Nebraska volleyball. They played 2 games this past week against Maryland and Rutgers, won both of them 3-0. So our girls are still undefeated, still the number 1 team in the country. And they play against Penn State this Friday, who they beat 3-0 earlier in the season, but they're obviously a talented team, so not one you want to underestimate. Do you have any comments on their performance?
Well, the performance was not what Coach Cook was hoping for, right? They were both, statistically and in terms of being 3-0 sweeps, dominant wins, right? But there were stretches in both games in which our team played down to the competition, so to speak, a little bit, okay? And what he's trying to get them to understand is you're good, and you're going to be able to beat a lot of teams with your less than best effort, but that's not going to make you better. And you need to get better, because if you don't get better between now and the end of the season, Wisconsin's going to hand you your rear end. So you guys got to get a lot better. Okay. And without saying you got lucky the first time, he's saying we've got to get better. And we still have some significant problems. We still are serving too many service errors are accumulating in each match. And then we have these periods of time where we just kind of get discombobulated, and we don't maintain our training. We don't trust our training, and we start doing silly things, and we just can't have it. Now to speak to this Penn State game, we played Penn State and then Rutgers again, and he acknowledged after the Rutgers match, this is probably the best Rutgers team he's seen since joining the Big Ten. This is a team with some real talent, and now we're going to have to play both Penn State and Rutgers away from the Devaney, right? They're away from home, and Penn State is going to do a whiteout. It's already a sellout. That place is going to be rocking on Friday night, and Penn State is absolutely capable of beating us. We aren't that much better. We beat them 3-0, but they were close sets. We didn't blow them out, right? So we darn well better have our together, or we run the risk of losing against Penn State. If we can get through that game, then every other team we play between now and that next Wisconsin game is a very winnable volleyball game. This Penn State game is super critical. So I'm going to be locked in on Friday night for this game. And so if anybody's a volleyball fan or just wants to entertain the sport, that is going to be one barn-burning volleyball game on Friday night. I can almost guarantee it. We will get their best shot.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that plays out, and hopefully we'll be talking about the girls remaining undefeated next week. In terms of week 9 of college football, there were some good games as always. One that we gave a prediction for was Oregon versus Utah.
Yes.
You predicted that Oregon would win 35-31. And then I predicted that Utah would win 31-28. But I mostly went with Utah, just to spice things up, to be different from you. I really thought that Oregon was the better team, and frankly, they proved to be the much better team in terms of the score. It ended up being a 35-6 victory for Oregon at home for Utah. Utah had 2 turnovers in the game, and interestingly, the score was 35-6 with 6 minutes to go in the third quarter. So it just goes to show you Utah kept trying and kept failing to score, and Oregon just kind of started to run the game out, right? And
Yep,
pretty dominant performance.
it was, and Oregon has looked like a national championship contender at times, and then they've had a couple of games where they didn't at all look like that, right? And so it's a little bit of a head scratcher to figure out whether Oregon is on a trajectory of improvement or whether they're just a team that's a little bit, on again, off again. And by the way, don't be hiding behind this. I would just wanted to spice things up. If you make a choice, buddy, live with it.
All right. Well, maybe I just won't be interesting anymore and just go with the favorites then.
Exactly.
Is that what you want?
Well, no, I want you to pick the team you think's going to win. And if you think an upset is in the offing, then by golly, you jump at it and you stick your neck out.
All right.
But then stand behind it.
All right, fair enough. The other game that we gave a prediction for was Ohio State versus Wisconsin. Big Ten matchup that could have been interesting. You predicted that they would win. Ohio State would win 35-17. I predicted a higher scoring 45-17, and it being quite a bit lower scoring than that. But Ohio State did win 24-10 at home for Wisconsin.
Right.
Interestingly, it was quite a turnover-heavy game. Ohio State had 3 turnovers, while Wisconsin had 2, and it was actually a 10-10 in the third quarter. So Wisconsin kept it low scoring for a while there, but Ohio State kind of took it away from that point on.
Right. Well, but still, I got to say, Wisconsin competed with them and challenged them way more than I thought they were going to. And, of course, Ohio State's, turnovers certainly were a part of that reason. But like say, Wisconsin had their own share of some turnovers as well. So I'm still surprised that it wasn't more of a lopsided game. The fact that they were 10-10 in the third quarter is, I think, quite impressive by Wisconsin, right? Now, at the same time, I know it was costly, too, because Wisconsin lost their starting running back, who I view as one of the better running backs in the Big Ten. Hasn't really had a great year this year because he's struggled to adjust to the new offense they're running, but still an incredible talent. And I don't know, but I'm hopeful that he will be out until after the Nebraska game. Then he can come back. But I'm hopeful that he's at least out until after Nebraska.
Yes, I hope so too. And then this was a very exciting one, Kansas, Oklahoma, the biggest upset of the weekend. I don't think we even talked about the game much last week, but it was a home game for Kansas, and they ended up winning 38-33 over Oklahoma. Once again, there were some mistakes on both sides. Both teams fumbled a kickoff at various points. Oklahoma had 3 turnovers, and one of which was a pick 6, right, which let Kansas go up early in the game. Plus, Oklahoma had 11 penalties for 100 yards. So, clearly not Oklahoma's best game, and, it was a back-and-forth affair, right, where both teams were kind of scoring, but Kansas got the last touchdown late in the game and managed to pull it out. I know your brother Mike was very excited about that one.
Yes, he was there and his family were all there to witness it, even in that miserable weather. It was cold and rainy and just not a good weather day at all, but a huge, huge victory for Kansas, and really is now indicative of I was going to try to check it here real quick. The Big 12 is kind of just an absolute wide open race now. I mean, they've got a bunch of teams that are tied or within a game of each other. And, a few weeks ago, you would have thought, well, this is likely headed to a Oklahoma-Texas rematch in the conference championship because they don't have divisions and they just pick the top 2 teams. but they're going to have potentially a bunch of teams that are going to be tied with each other at the end, and there could be some kind of a round robin tiebreaker that they might have to process. We'll see. Obviously, this week's game is going to be super critical because you've got Kansas State playing Texas, I believe it is, and then Oklahoma State. So the Bedlam series final round is this Saturday as well, which that's a huge matchup year in and year out, and doesn't always go to the best team, right? I mean, there's a bunch of upsets in that series, and Oklahoma State has won the last 4. So how amazing would it be if Oklahoma State could find a way and end up beating Oklahoma and walk out of that series with a 5-game winning streak on OU?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I remember we commented last week about Oklahoma had kind of flown under the radar in terms of their perfect season. And I even commented like, oh, their remaining schedule isn't too tough, and then they trip up against Kansas just the next week. Right. So that's college football for you.
That is college football. Amen.
Yeah. And then this was another crazy game, USC versus Cal. It was at home for Cal. Rivalry game, of course. And amazingly, USC won the game 50-49, so a very high scoring game. And Cal was actually 4-1 in terms of turnovers. So Cal had 4, USC had 1, and yet they were still able to make it that close. And in fact, their coach did the thing that we've been talking about in some previous podcasts. He went for 2 after scoring a late touchdown with like a minute to go in the game, right, which would have put them up 51-50. So he was basically saying, I don't want to play overtime against the better team. I'm the underdog. I'm going to bet it all on this 2-point conversion. Unfortunately, they didn't get it. But I appreciate the guts to go for it.
Yeah, well, I get that. But again, boy, it's just, you hate to have, somebody lose in that situation who's got a chance to really make a huge impact on the game, right? Like that would have been a massive win for Cal, massive. So it's so disappointing when you get that close in that circumstance and then aren't able to finish it off.
Right, but I mean, USC, right? I don't remember exactly how many it's been, but they've been in several overtime games this season already, right? And I want to say they've generally done well in them. They've got a great offense, obviously. So in a kind of shootout situation like that, where you're at a shorter field situations, right, with where you're set up in overtime, do you have confidence in your defense that's already given up 50 points, to be able to stop them, and win in a shootout? They'll go down to 2-point conversions, battling back and forth anyways, so
right.
I get the logic.
Oh, me too. I get the logic. It's just so crushing when it doesn't work out in favor of the underdog.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how long it would have been before Cal would have another chance. Obviously, with them leaving the conferences, they're not going to play very much in the future. So you got 5 teams that are 4-1 in the Big 12. Oklahoma, Texas, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Iowa State are all 4-1.
Wow.
And then Kansas and West Virginia are 3-2. So they're just 1 game back. So that is where that league is at, and the top 2 go. So it's going to be a fascinating last 5 weeks of the season for these teams.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I should have maybe mentioned earlier, but this week is the start of the college football playoff rankings. Of course, we're recording this on a Monday, and those will come out tomorrow on a Tuesday. So we don't know what they are yet, but we'll start tracking that as we get into the later part of the season here and kind of see who the top 4 teams are likely to be. A lot of it might come down to those conference championship games at the end of the year, right? Especially with the Big 12 and things like that. So
it will be. It's going to be a fascinating sequence these next few weeks. That's for sure.
Now, one team that you've been quite fond of following this year, Duke, had a tough game against Louisville this week. It was It was at home for Louisville, but Louisville was ranked 18th. Duke was ranked 20th. So, they were considered to be very competitive, but ended up being a 23-0 drumming by Louisville. Duke's offense, I watched the highlights of that game, and there wasn't like anything super crazy in terms of turnovers or whatever. Their offense just couldn't get going, even though they had their starting quarterback who got hurt in the previous game. He was back in this game. maybe still affected by that injury.
Yeah, that was brutal. Well, and we were in that area, right? So we were right in Durham. So obviously, I was paying particular attention to North Carolina, which is in Chapel Hill, just a few miles away from where we were camping. And of course, they've lost the last 2 weeks in a row now, North Carolina, and then Duke got just crushed by Louisville. Very, very disappointing.
Yeah, well, and that North Carolina game, that was another good one this week. They lost 46-42 to Georgia Tech. They had a critical fumble where I want to say was it at the end of the game where they were driving it right and they had the chance to potentially score. I guess they needed a touchdown, but if they'd scored a touchdown, they would have won. But it was a completed pass, and then the dude fumbled it like when he got hit, and that was the end of the game.
Wow. Yep. Just sad,
Yeah.
but because they came into the season looking like a real serious contender for the ACC crown, along with Florida State, and now I think they're kind of a distant memory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and two games from some of those top contending teams. Georgia played against Florida this past week, and they won solidly 43-20. And then Washington played against Stanford and won a little less solidly, 42-33.
Right. Wow. I don't have any comments about that.
Yeah, I didn't watch the highlights of those ones. One I did
No.
watch.
Hey, what about the Clemson score?
Yep, NC State played against Clemson. It was a
Yeah.
home game for NC State, and they won 24-17.
And nationally, I believe an alumnus, a very popular basketball alumnus of NC State, was a host on a show, for picking the winner. He picked Clemson to win the game, which of course most people would, right? Going into the game, I think Clemson was the favorite, but and he basically said, NC State's a basketball school. Then of course NC State wins, and the head coach takes that opportunity to pounce on that comment from Steve Smith, I think his name was, and just ripped him a new one.
That's right. Yeah, I guess I did watch the highlights of the game, but I don't have any comments on it, so I don't know if there was anything super crazy. I know Clemson did have some turnovers, and I believe it's the first time in quite a while that they are now guaranteed to not have a 10-win season. So, I think earlier on in this kind of downturn for Dabo Sweeney, people were like, oh, it might just be a bad year, right? He'll turn it back around into where they were, competing for national championships. But it's been a few years now, and it's not going the right direction for him.
Right. I would agree with that.
Yeah. And then this game was quite interesting. UCLA played against Colorado. It was a home game for UCLA, and they were the favorites, and they won 28-16. Do you happen to know what the turnover margin was in that game?
No, I don't know what the turnover margin was, but I do know that there was a late score by Colorado, or a later score by Colorado, because I believe that for a good portion of that game, UCLA had a comfortable lead, and it was like 26 to whatever, 7 or 8. And they had it under control. UCLA was moving the football rather well. Although I will concede that Colorado's offense is still quite talented and was moving the ball as well, but just wasn't turning it into points.
Right. Well, so actually, UCLA was -4 on turnovers. They turned the ball over 4 times. Colorado turned over none, and they still won the game.
Right. Okay, there you go. Because when the portions that I watched, it just seemed like UCLA's offense was just marching it down the field whenever they wanted. So yeah, I mean, Colorado's got some serious defensive deficiencies, and their offense.
Well, no. This is not the narrative at all. For one thing, UCLA made another mistake in that they doinked a 25-yard field goal. So the spread should have been even higher. And to your point, you are correct. Colorado scored an 8-point, go for 2 touchdown late in the game when the outcome was kind of already decided because there wasn't enough time left.
Right.
But when Colorado's defense gets 4 turnovers, right, your offense
Right.
should be able to capitalize on that. The offense sputtered terribly in this game. They were getting
Yeah,
sacked. Their offensive line
they
is
were.
really struggling. So this
Yep.
one, you can't blame it on the defense.
Gotcha. Well, good. I love hearing Colorado lose every time. I will never be unhappy about that.
All right. Well, I'm glad that you're pleased there, Dad. Um, so then this upcoming week, we've got, like you mentioned, there are some good games in the Big 12. Texas against Kansas State at home for Texas. Oklahoma versus Oklahoma State at home for Oklahoma State. And then Kansas, coming off that big victory, is playing away against Iowa State.
Right. And Iowa State is 4-1. That is a huge, huge matchup.
Right. All of a sudden now, right, like you say, since it's kind of been opened up.
Right.
Um, so, yeah, I mean, Oklahoma State has struggled this year, so I think Oklahoma should be able to beat them. But, if Kansas is able to do it, why not Oklahoma State, right? And similarly, Texas should be able to handle Kansas State, but, you never know what can happen. So,
Right. Well, and Kansas State has looked really good. I mean, Kansas State has an offensive line that would be the envy of everyone except maybe Michigan. I mean, so you've got to be worried when you have to play that team.
right.
They're going to be disciplined and not make a lot of mistakes because that's what their coach is known for. And then you add on top of that the fact that they have a very, very good offensive line, and that could spell trouble for a lot of teams.
Right. And this one's quite interesting as well. Number 20 UCLA has to play away against Arizona, and Arizona is coming off a big upset win of their own where they beat Oregon
Yeah.
State 27-24.
Yeah.
Although it was partially because Oregon State's coach made a really bad blunder, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and Arizona, what is their record on the year too? Arizona was like probably one of the lower ranked teams in the entire Pac-12. So very surprising result.
Right. Yeah, we'll have to look up what their scores are. But the games that we're going to be predicting this particular week are Alabama LSU. It is a home game for Alabama, but obviously that's always a big matchup in the SEC. I believe they're both coming off of either wins or bye weeks. I didn't see anything for them on the week 9 schedule for college football. So what are your feelings there?
I don't know. What are your thoughts? You give me your thoughts, then I'll give you mine.
Okay. Well, so to quickly comment, Arizona is actually more in the middle of the pack in the Pac-12. They're currently 5-3, so I guess going to that game they were 4-3.
Okay. Well, then I was misinformed.
And then I'm looking at Bama right now. Right. And so, yeah, they had a bye week. So they beat Tennessee, right, previously. And then they've had a bye week. And now I'm looking at LSU. They also had a bye week. Okay, so both teams have had the full 2 weeks to heal up and prepare. The coaches have had their time. And given that it is a home game for Alabama, right, and that both teams have the same amount of time to prepare, if it's a battle of, coaching brains, Nick Saban versus Brian Kelly, I got to believe that Nick Saban comes out on top, particularly because in the latter part of that Tennessee game, right, they kind of got their offense chugging. So if they can continue that momentum, then I think they can handle this one.
I would 100% agree. And I think I didn't realize I had forgotten that Alabama was coming off of a bye week. I think it's definitely an Alabama victory, and it wouldn't shock me if it's a comfortable victory by 3 scores, 17.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, so what is your score prediction then?
Okay. Well, shoot. I'm going to say, let's make it a 17-point. So let's do 38-21.
I like that. I think I'll go a little lower scoring, but I do think Alabama's going to win. So I will say it ends up being 34-21, Alabama.
Okay, 34-21. So very close to mine then.
Yes, I was thinking about lowering it, but I kind of changed my mind. So, We'll see if we're right on that one.
There you go.
And then another big one this time in the Pac-12 is Washington versus USC. It is a home game for USC. Both teams are obviously coming off of wins, but maybe more narrow than they were expecting. Certainly in the case of USC, right? They came within hairbreadths of losing to Cal there. So in terms of momentum, you'd have to say that Washington's got way more than USC does. They've come off a tough loss and some close games. But you can't discount, Caleb Williams, right? That offensive power, and the fact that Washington, frankly, got a little bit lucky against Oregon to be able to win that game. So I think this one could go either way, but I am going to stick with Washington winning. And I'll say it'll be a pretty high scoring game. So let's say it ends up being 42 Washington to 35 USC.
Okay, that's good. That's a good score. And I also agree. I think Washington is the better team. The fact that it is being played at USC and that, frankly, USC's kind of backs are against the wall. I mean, I think it's already etched in stone that USC is going to be firing their defensive coordinator at the end of the year. And that scares the heck out of me as a Nebraska fan, because right now, all the buzz is about our defensive coordinator. And he is a West Coast guy, so it scares the heck out of me to think that USC is going to come a knocking for him when this season is over, and that scares me a little bit. I'm going to say Washington wins, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think Washington wins, but it's maybe a little lower scoring. So I'm going to say 35 to Washington and 24 for USC.
Okay, I like that score. And yes, you bring up a good point about Tony White, our defensive coordinator, because clearly the defense is the shining spot in Nebraska's current team. So we'll have to try to hold on to him when the season comes to an end.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hoping is he's at a spot where, if his aspiration is to one day be a head coach, the idea of being able to stick around and be a part of, the Nebraska turnaround that Rule is trying to establish would really do him a lot of good. And, just based on the young talent that he's got on his defense, he could easily wait another year. And then after the following year, 2024, he might be able to jump from coordinator to head coach, right? You stick around for a few years and continue your success, then instead of taking a $2 million a year, top defensive coordinator position at a place like USC, you could get a $6 million a year head coaching job somewhere. So it might be financially beneficial as well as career advancement beneficial for you to wait.
Yeah. And we won't give a score prediction here, but Georgia is playing against Missouri this weekend, who's ranked 14th in the country, right? They've been having a good year for them, but it is at home for Georgia. So my expectation is that they will handle business and continue to remain undefeated.
I would agree. I think Georgia turned a corner this last week and is going to take it up a notch.
You may be right. So we're going to wrap up the podcast today with just a couple of news discussions, because there's a lot swirling around with the whole sign stealing thing with Jim Harbaugh in Michigan, but I don't think we're going to touch on that more unless something major happens in regards to that whole series of events. One interesting piece of news, though, that I shared with you after our previous podcast was that the NCAA has already announced that during the bowl season this year, they are going to be doing a tryout of having quarterbacks with microphones in their helmets, being able to communicate directly with the coaches. So that is something that we will see this upcoming winter. And hopefully this whole kind of scandal that's blown up real big in the news will kind of hurry along, accelerate their process that they were maybe already planning on in terms of implementing that on a wider scale.
Thank you. It's wonderful. I hope it goes well and it leads to, us being able, or I should say, big schools being able to use some technology that, frankly, they should have been using for quite some time.
Yes. And then one piece of news that just came out today as we're recording this is that Brian Ferentz, who is the son of Coach Kirk Ferentz at Iowa and has been their offensive coordinator now for several years, it's been officially announced that he will be off the team as of the season's end. It was announced by the interim athletic director at Iowa. And obviously fans, have been quite upset that he was still, the offensive coordinator and calling out Kirk Ferentz for nepotism and things like that, because Iowa's offense has been bad, to put it frankly, for quite some time, and even worse this season than last season. So for the Iowa fans out there, I'm sure they're happy to hear that news. For Nebraska fans, we would have liked to see Brian stick around to keep them down, but
absolutely, I wish he would have stayed as long as possible. So that's good news for Iowa fans and not good news for us. But hopefully, we'll be able to reap the benefit of Brian's lack of success. One last time here. This season.
Well, yeah. I mean, like you say, 1-0, focused on the next game. Well, that upcoming Iowa game, I got to believe it'll be kind of awkward to have him still be coaching as your offensive coordinator, but knowing that he's, gone after this year, right, for the team, that will have one of two effects. Either they really rally behind him, and try to play better, for the coach's sake, or it will have a negative effect, So let's hope it goes one way for Nebraska.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
And then lastly, I know you wanted to touch on a larger point for our off-season discussion in January, February to follow about targeting, right, which has been kind of a sticking point for us ever since the rule was implemented, and we saw some examples of it in games this past week where it kind of went different ways, and it's a little confusing about like what the actual rule is. Do you want to dive into that now, or kind of save it for the future?
Well, we can save it for the future, but my only comment, of course, obviously, what brings it to the forefront this week is that we observed it in the Nebraska game, but I've also seen it in other games. And my challenge for the NCAA Rules Committee is for them to figure out how to better define, the different levels of that rule, and then how they utilize video review in the interpretation of that rule, because I witnessed two examples of a potential targeting situation in the Nebraska game, for example, this weekend, that were both, in my opinion, adjudicated incorrectly. And the video, which should have made it very, very clear that in one case, absolutely targeting occurred, and that somebody lowered their head and used it as a spear and literally hit with the crown of his helmet, and they didn't even give him a 15-yard penalty. They removed everything, and there was no flag. Versus another case where, frankly, a player was simply in the air and in the act of making a tackle, and the player fell down in front of him, and once you're in the air, you can't stop. And the guy made efforts to avoid the helmet contact, and he got the 15 yards. Now, he didn't get ejected, so thank God the review process worked in that case. But there's something wrong when these things keep happening. If you're going to use the video review, then you have to use it in a wise fashion with certain guidelines. And I think that right now the interpretation is too variable, game to game, group, referee to referee.
I see.
But that's for an off-season, longer-term discussion we can do on a podcast in the off-season. I want to mention one more thing, just because it literally just happened today, okay? And it involves our volleyball team again. One of our premier players, our libero, Lexi Rodriguez, who is a junior this year, and is probably regarded as one of the best, if not the best, libero in the country. And she was just given an NIL contract with Panini, one of the largest sports memorabilia card, trading cards, right? He was signed to a card agreement, and they introduced him today. And they introduced three cards, three levels of cards. I'm assuming that one was for like $10, another one was $60, and another one was $200. Okay, and obviously the more expensive ones are probably much more limited and maybe have an official autograph signature, or different elements to them, right? Well, I just looked online. The two expensive ones already sold out.
Big surprise.
Yeah, and so a great example, and her again being a leader in this whole NIL thing, and showing the path for the future young women who play collegiate athletics.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we'll definitely talk more about the, various rules around targeting and its general enforcement in the off season, as well as other discussion around rules changes, right? We'll definitely come back on the whole accelerated clock thing, right? Now that we'll have experienced a full year of it.
Exactly.
And things of that nature.
Yes, I'm liking that.
All right.
Sounds good.
Cool. Well, if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify if you search for College Football Throwdown. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing from the fans. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.